The biting chill of a South Dakota wind whipped through the small reservation town of Pine Creek. Snow crunched beneath worn boots as people hurried to their homes, heads down, shoulders hunched. But one man stood out from the flow of moving figures. He wasn't hurrying anywhere. He just stood at the bus stop, clutching a bundled infant in his arms, his long, dark braids dusted with snow. His eyes scanned the street, not for a bus, but for something more intangible. Shelter. A chance. A sign he could still believe in kindness. He hadn't planned to be here, not like this. His name was Eli Red Feather, a 28-year-old member of the Lakota Sioux tribe, born on the reservation and forgotten by most of the world outside it. Once a rodeo star and tribal youth mentor, now he was just a man broken by grief, carrying the weight of the world, and a newborn, in his calloused hands. The baby stirred, letting out a faint whimper. Eli tightened his grip, his frostbitten lips trembling not from the cold, but from helplessness. Across the street, inside the flickering warmth of a modest diner, a woman named Mary Simmons poured coffee into mugs for the late afternoon crowd. She had owned Mary's Hearth for nearly 20 years. Widowed young, childless, and nearing 60, Mary had built her little restaurant into more than a business. It was her sanctuary, a place where truckers, farmhands, and lost souls came for food, and sometimes, redemption. Her eyes caught movement outside the frosted window. A man, tall, stoic, tribal features, was rocking a baby in his arms under the dying light of the day. Something in the set of his shoulders, in the stillness of his body against the chaos of the world around him, tugged at her heart. Without a second thought, she wiped her hands, shrugged into her coat, and stepped out into the cold. "You all right?" she asked gently. Eli looked up. His eyes, the color of dark river stone, searched hers for a trace of judgment. But all he saw was concern. "We don't need much," he said hoarsely. "Just a place out of the wind for a while." Mary studied him for a long second. "Bring the baby in. You both look like you're freezing." He hesitated. Pride had been beaten into submission by the storms of life, but it still whispered, "Don't beg." Still, for the baby's sake, he nodded and followed her inside. They sat at a back booth. The baby, a girl no more than a few months old, now nestled in a blanket Mary found in the back room, slept softly against Eli's chest. Mary brought him soup and bread without asking questions. But her eyes kept returning to him, wondering about the story that had carved those lines on his face. Finally, she asked, "What's her name?" "Star." He ran a finger across the infant's cheek. "My daughter." Mary tilted her head. "And the mother?" Eli looked away. "Gone. Died giving birth in a trailer outside Bismarck. She was white. Her family didn't want the baby. Said they wouldn't raise a half-breed. I buried her with my own hands. Then I left. Been walking, hitching rides, doing odd jobs. Thought maybe I could find work here. A place to start again." Mary's throat tightened. In his words were decades of pain, not just personal but generational, the ache of displacement, racism, and a culture fraying at the edges. "You've had it hard." Eli shrugged. "We all do." Over the next few days, Mary let him help around the diner. Fixing shelves, hauling crates, shoveling snow. Star slept in the break room crib Mary had hastily set up. Eli never asked for money. He was always early, always worked hard, always disappeared to a corner when customers came, as if he knew people would look at him sideways. Some did. One evening, as Mary wiped down tables, a regular customer, Jack Carlson, a retired contractor, muttered, "That Indian guy still hanging around?" Mary stopped, her rag clenched in her hand. "He's a single dad with nowhere to go," she said sharply. "And a harder worker than most folks I've hired." Jack grumbled, "You're too soft-hearted, Mary. Don't be surprised when something goes missing." Eli heard it. But he didn't respond. Just lowered his eyes and kept sweeping the floor. Mary saw it, the quiet dignity, the pain swallowed again and again. That night, she walked over and placed a firm hand on his shoulder. You and Star can stay in the back room for as long as you need. I mean it. Eli looked at her, stunned. You don't have to do that. I know, she said. But I want to. Winter deepened. Eli became part of the rhythm of the diner. He cooked when short-staffed, repaired broken stools, and once even helped deliver a baby in the women's bathroom when a customer went into early labor. Mary watched as people slowly began to change. Jack, the grumpy old regular, one day brought Eli a box of diapers. For the kid, he muttered before walking out without waiting for thanks. One of the young waitresses, Kara, a high school dropout with a messy past, began sitting with Eli during breaks. They talked about life, loss, and the Lakota way, stories of buffalo hunts, the sacred Black Hills, and the wisdom of grandmothers. She began calling him Uncle Eli. Mary watched it all with quiet pride. A man who came in from the cold had become the quiet backbone of her little world. But peace never lasts long. One Sunday afternoon, two men in suits walked into the diner, one tall and red-faced, the other sharp-eyed and silent. They asked to speak to Eli. Mary's stomach twisted. Out back, the confrontation unfolded. The tall man was a relative of Star's mother, the woman who had died. He claimed Star was part of their bloodline, and he had legal paperwork proving guardianship rights, granted by a North Dakota court. They hadn't known the baby was still alive. Now, they wanted her back. Eli's face went pale. You didn't want her then, he said. You called her a mistake. We've reconsidered, the man said coldly. And you're not fit to raise a child. You don't have a home, a job, or even a high school diploma. Mary stepped in. He does now. He has a job, a place to stay, and people who care. The silent man spoke for the first time. We'll see you in court. The hearing was held in a dusty courthouse 3 towns over. Mary went with Eli. So did Kara and Jack and half a dozen regulars from the diner. The judge, a tired-looking woman with salt and pepper hair, heard both sides. When Eli spoke, he didn't plead. He simply said, I don't have much. But I have love. I have stories. I have songs in Lakota that I want my daughter to hear. I want her to grow up knowing she belongs. Mary testified about his work, his honesty, his soul. In the end, the judge looked at the relatives. You ignored this child when she needed you most. Eli Red Feather may not have wealth, but he has what no court can enforce, love, dedication, and the courage to rise above prejudice. Custody remains with him. Tears rolled silently down Eli's cheeks as he held Star close. Mary squeezed his hand, her own heart soaring. A year passed. The back room became a proper apartment. Eli enrolled in night classes. Kara earned her GED and got a scholarship for community college, inspired, she said, by a Lakota man who taught her stories could save lives. Mary's heart expanded. With Eli's help, they added a new menu featuring native cuisine, fry bread tacos, bison stew, wild berry pudding. It drew in curious tourists and traveling food bloggers. The diner was thriving. And every Sunday evening, just before closing, Eli would gather anyone willing to listen and share Lakota stories around a makeshift fire pit outside the diner. He spoke of ancestors, of resilience, of honoring pain by transforming it into strength. Mary often stood at the door, arms folded, eyes shining with pride. One cold night, as Star toddled toward her calling, Grammy, Mary scooped her up and whispered, You've brought so much light into this place, little one. Eli walked over, his eyes reflecting the firelight. I came here lost, he said. You gave me more than shelter. You gave us hope. Mary smiled through misty eyes. No, Eli. You brought hope with you. I just made sure you knew it still had a home.